Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I'm an Episcopal priest, and I live here in Austin, Texas. I've had the gift of recovery since December the 27th of 1972, and very grateful to my 12-step program for all that it's given me over the years. Purpose of these podcasts is to go deeper into the spirituality, the history, the psychology, things that maybe people don't get in the regular stream of things, and help people go deeper into the program. Okay, that's my idea. So anyway, if you like what you're hearing, please do the things that they tell you to do: like, subscribe, jump up and down. Most of all, tell a friend, and we want to get this message out to as many people as possible. So we're starting a new series this week. It's on a topic that really should be of interest not only to women, but to all of the men who are listening as well. And my guest is Diane Cameron. She's the author of a book titled Out of the Woods, A Woman's Guide to Long-Term Recovery. She's a journalist, a columnist, and a woman in long-term recovery herself. So Diane, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
I am so happy to be here.
All right, very good. I do want you to kind of begin with your recovery story, but before that, when we were visiting before the recording, you told me that your home is in Albany, New York, and
Right.
that one of your more famous recovery residents there was none other than AA's own Ebie Thatcher. People probably don't know a great deal about Ebie, so he is the talk of the town there. Tell us what they're saying about old Ebie.
Well, I feel like I'm often saying when I'm in meetings and Zoom meetings, telling people we owe so much to Ebie, because without Ebie, there would be no Bill Wilson, there would be no AA, all that stuff. Like, so we owe him some gratitude, I think.
Yeah.
So I got sober in Baltimore. And, in those years, I had gone up to the Wilson House in Vermont and paid my tribute to Bill and the Graves and Lois.
Right. All that good stuff.
It's a mission site, really. It's a pilgrimage site for many people in recovery. So then I'm learning this story and I'm hearing about Ebie. Well, Ebie's story, we tell Ebie's story as if it is in Vermont, as if it is in Dorset, Vermont, because that was the family's summer home. This is what was interesting. But his real home and his birth was in Albany, New York. So we're about 55 minutes away. So right away, that tells you something. They had a summer home. So we know a sense of this family's status. And Ebie met Bill as a summer kid. Bill was the townie, which is also tells you something about the story, I think, that we have these wealthy kids and then we have the townie kid whose parents have a hotel. So I became very interested in Ebie because it's like here in Albany, we have a beautiful, gorgeous park called Thatcher Park. And there's lots of statues of Thatchers. They were two mayors, one almost governor, which Ebie spoiled. So the Thatcher name is very well known. And actually to this day, there are Thatchers around. And interesting, there are a couple that are in recovery.
Kidding.
So they love telling the Ebie story. And Ebie is buried in Albany Rural Cemetery, which is one of the great garden cemeteries in the United States. Like there's one.
It's not a big pilgrimage site, is it?
Well, you know what? It has never been, and recently, I think, as more people are doing history, because I'll tell you part of my story is I learned that, and I thought, oh my God, I'm right here, Albany Rules, right up the road, and I'm going to go find Ebie's grave. I was a little bit nervous though, so as I thought, it's a great big cemetery, and I thought, how am I going to find Ebie's grave? So I thought, there's an office, and they help families, and I thought, do I tell them why? And who exactly who? So I go in.
You got to protect his anonymity, huh?
And mine. I was more concerned about mine. So I go in and I say, I'm looking for the Thatcher family plot. And the guy said to me, are you looking for Ebie? And I was like, okay, gig is up. And he gave me a map and he drew on the map how to find it. And I went there. Now, anybody who's been to Bill's grave knows there's no trouble finding Bill's grave in his cemetery, because it's covered with balloons and teddy bears and thank you notes and
empty coffee cup.
Everything is there. So I know that I'm not going to see that, but so I go to Thatcher plot, big stone, a million little stones in front of it. And then I think, his name wasn't Ebie. who am I looking for? His real name wasn't Ebie, it was Edwin. But
Yeah.
Ebie was the nickname. So then I'm looking to find Edwin, and I think it's fall, and there's no stuff there. But I'm saying my prayer. I get down on my knees and I'm thanking Ebie, and I start to brush away. I thought, let me clean up this grave a little. I start to brush away the leaves and the branches, and I
Yes.
see coins. I see
Ah,
coins,
there
and
they
as I
are.
pick them up, this is what really got me. They're 20, 25 old timers come to Ebie because they get it. Because Ebie technically died sober, but he had a really hard time staying sober.
Yeah.
And I think the old timers appreciated that. They appreciated how long this man worked at it, how Bill worked at Ebie's sobriety. So I found all these coins. Now today, the family keeps that grave cleaner, and there's more. You find more things there. But it was very
Nice.
moving to know Ebie's story.
Nice. Yeah. Well, good. I heard a story. I don't know if you can vouch for this one, but that one of the reasons Ebie thought of Bill, and he made the phone call. He just gotten sober. He's over at the mission at Calvary Church in New York. And one of the stories that I heard about him was that Wilson and Ebie got drunk in Albany, and they chartered a plane, and a new airport was just opening in Manchester, Vermont. They're both drunk. The inaugural flight is supposed to come in, I think it was from New York City, to begin service, and their plane landed first,
That's
and
perfect.
the band is there. They're playing the music, and two drunks fall out on the tarmac.
Isn't that perfect for like two alcoholics? It's like, hey, look, they have a band.
Let's go be first at the new airport.
Right.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So if you're up in Albany, stop in and say hello to old Ebie.
Absolutely.
Yeah, easier to find now. The other thing I wanted to mention before we get into the book is, and this is how I came across your name and such. It was in a journal article, a recovery article that the church puts out, the Episcopal Church puts out. Some of them are not so good. I read this one. I said, "Oh, this is good." And it's titled, "What We Can Do to Help Our Addicted Communities." I put a link to it in the show notes. And what I liked about the article particularly was that you shared that the problem of addiction, if you want to solve the problem, you've got the individual who has to take responsibility and go do the thing. But at a deeper level, it's a problem within our culture and within our communities. Yes. I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think there's many pieces of this, and because again, I'm glad you said that the ultimate responsibility is the individual, maybe the
right.
family, whatever they're creating.
Right.
But what are we doing as a community to prevent addiction, as well as to support people maybe moving toward recovery or need to move toward recovery? Because it turns out, and I quote this guy, Andrew Sullivan, who writes a lot about recovery, who says, it is about despair, right? When the individual doesn't create their own despair, their community creates despair. Sometimes the family creates despair. And part of it, and we know this, loneliness is an epidemic in the United States. We know this, the issue in senior services. We know it with young people. Right. We know young people coming out of the pandemic did not learn how to communicate. And so there's this despair in the community that all of us, addicted or not, can be part of healing. Whether it's we have the gift in 12-step programs of literally having groups. We have our loneliness and our despair adjusted for us a little bit. We can be part of something. Other people can't. I mean, and maybe for you too, many people have said to me over the years, oh, I wish I was an addict so I could have AA.
Yeah.
Because they can see that part. They can see you have friends, you have community, you have rituals, you have all this
right.
stuff.
Ceremonies. Bring that coin to Albany.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so what can we do? And then I think the faith community is an enormous part, can be an enormous part of this. Other than the basements of those churches, I said to a friend yesterday, I was like, would they let us come upstairs to the sanctuary and say a few words about the need for community? And I have to say this, the Episcopal Church is the only one that I know of Protestant denominations that has a structured recovery focus. The Episcopal recovery movement.
Well, we got a lot of drunken Episcopalians out there.
Well, somebody said to me, it's because of the wine.
No. Wherever 4 Episcopalians are gathered together, you're sure to find a 5th. That's the old joke, yeah. Could you share a little bit of your own recovery story? You are a woman in long-term recovery yourself. How did it get started for you?
The long story. Started with lots of family stuff, trauma in and out of the family. I knew, like many people, I knew something was wrong with me, but I didn't know what it was. And part of that, I'll explain, my alcoholism was hidden from me. I hid it from myself. My intervention, I kind of love this because I'm a word person, a language person, a book person. My intervention was a book. A book ages ago, Robin Norwood, Women Who Love Too Much, which is about relationships, right? So the crazy part of the story, within about a 2-week period, 6 people gave me that book. My therapist, a woman at work, somebody who knew me from the social group. And the kicker was a woman on the bus. I took the bus to and from work. So a woman that I would see on the bus every day, she must have heard me talking about this boyfriend and that problem. And she said, honey, I heard about this book. This is for you. And again, I thought my problem was relationships, period. I picked bad partners, bad boyfriends. And so I'm reading Robin Norwood's book, and it's painful to read because it turns out to be about daughters in alcoholic families or addicted families and what the patterns are for them in relationships. And I'm reading and I'm identifying. It's like, oh my God, this is me. And then the very back of her book, she says, famous words, if you identified with anything in this book, there is a good chance that you have a problem with alcohol, drugs, food, work, worry. And it was like a pinball machine. I went bing, 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 bing.
Yeah.
And then, grace of God, I know this. She gave all the 800 numbers, and I called them. Me by myself would never have called those numbers. I would have had too much pride, too much ego, and too much like, oh, okay, good point there. I'll go figure this out by myself. But that day I called those 800 numbers. I was in Baltimore, so no surprise. They said, there's a meeting down the street. This program meets across the street from you. It was very convenient in that sense. So I went, interestingly, I first went to OA because I knew I had a problem with like body image, eating, that kind of thing. And I went to a couple of meetings, and the ladies in that meeting, bless their hearts, they said to me, if you want to learn more about this, our program comes from AA. That's the granddaddy. So go to a few of those meetings so you learn how this thing works and you learn about these steps, and you can go to open meetings, And so I go to those meetings, and all of a sudden I hear very specifically women talking about their drinking at home, in the house, privately, in the kitchen, no DWIs. And I thought, oh, I am in trouble now, because I could hear it. I knew that was me.
Yeah.
I knew that was me. And the other way that I hid alcohol from myself is I say it always had whipped cream on it. I drank Irish coffees, pink ladies, pretty drinks. I drank a lot of them, but they were
not a sloppy drunk.
How could it be a problem if it has whipped cream and sugar on it? Yeah. Now here's the side note is there's the other addiction is the sugar is part of this. I have to say it didn't always stay pretty. At the very end of my drinking, I was slumped on the kitchen floor with my back against the counter, but I was putting Irish whiskey in a dirty plastic coffee cup because I thought it was an Irish coffee. I had no more whipped cream. I didn't have time to put the sugar on the rim, but somehow in my head, I was still having an Irish coffee as long as the whiskey was good.
Oh, John Jameson. Was that the?
Absolutely.
I was a bartender in my old life. Yeah, that was my downfall.
So I wasn't, for the most part, I wasn't in bars. I wasn't falling down. Now, as memory cleared, I remember there were times that I was really weird in public. Right. I remember because that, like the ladylike part of this is one of the things for me. So I remember being in a restaurant. I had too many of my pretty drinks and I had to walk to the ladies' room. Well, I was walking so slow because I didn't want anybody to think I was drunk. So I was walking like this, slow, slow.
Right.
It's like the driver who drives too slow is also a sign of a drunk driver.
Right. You're only doing 10 miles on the interstate, 10 miles an hour. Right.
But as I began to understand what the real issue was, I couldn't grab these programs quickly enough. I always say my character defects in the early recovery were my assets. I was ambitious. So it was like, get a sponsor, I'll have two. Read this literature, I'll read it all.
Right.
Do service. They had to like pry my hands off the Tuesday morning meeting because I wouldn't stop being the secretary. But that got me into the habit that being ambitious, I wanted to be special, even in AA. I wanted to be special, right? So, but it got me in there and it got me making friends. And then I had a sponsor who said, okay, girl, you need to like calm down now. Like you can be a bozo on the bus now. Like join the rest of us with this thing.
Sometimes our character defects work to our advantage.
Absolutely.
You know? How long are you in recovery now, Diane?
40 years.
40. All right. Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
That's
And the thing that struck me, I was at a meeting. My home group meets at 7:00 in the morning, and now they meet on Zoom. So I was at my meeting this morning. And I thought, as I was listening to the speaker, I thought, this thing never ends. Like I'd learned so much stuff from this woman who was sharing. And it was like, oh, I'm going to try that. And I'm going to think about that for the rest of the day. And I thought, nowhere else in any other class I have taken or social organization that I belong to where it keeps going. It keeps on giving.
Well, if you're working a good spiritual program, it's endless. If you're just there to not drink, you've kind of missed the message.
And the point.
And the whole point, exactly.
Yeah. One of the ways that I heard about some of your work was I'm a book coach, and a woman that I was working on, she's in early recovery, but in her group in South Carolina, somebody was passing around the pamphlet about two-way prayer. And I thought, what is that? And all these years, that? And I had not heard about two-way prayer. And it was like, okay, another gift just came into my life.
For many people, it's the key ingredient. It was for me, and I get emails weekly from folks who, kind of getting bored and looking for more. And this thing just dovetails into our history, our spirituality. It's just a fit. And it got lost, kind of like old Ebie. Yes. Ebie got lost.
Right.
And those are the people who respond. My people tend to be folks who are in longer-term recovery and or coming back to the program and looking for some more oomph.
Right. Did they miss something? Right.
They missed something, yeah.
There is that piece. I mean, and I think that Ebie is part of this because I think the way that we have talked about the Oxford group was sort of like a footnote. And then there's Bill and Ebie and Ron and Young and boom, and then there was the Oxford group and boom, there was AA. Almost like AA just sprang out of the Oxford group.
Well, in the early days, they didn't want to connect themselves with it for a number of reasons. Yeah. So they kind of hid it in the basement.
And being able to say, here are the gifts from the Oxford group as this thing evolved.
Well, Wilson said, steps 2 through 11, straight from Sam Shoemaker, straight from the Oxford group. Right. He just tightened them up.
Right.
But the concepts were there. The process was there.
Right.
So good. Why did you write this book and gear it towards women in long-term recovery? It's not your usual audience.
No, but I thought that was, in a sense, part of it is like what then, let's say 35 years ago was happening in the rooms. There were lots of wise men sitting in the back of the room, kind of, they were the old time men back then, telling everybody how it should be. And then I always felt like the conversations in the parking lot was where the good stuff was coming forward. We would say in the rooms, we'd say all these things that we're supposed to say, like, whoever got up earliest this morning has the most recovery. And I understand the place of that. But that's not what was being said in the parking lot. In the parking lot, which were groups of women gathered by their cars, they were talking about other things that were hard, and maybe they weren't going to say in the next meeting, or they were saying, I don't quite go along with that anymore. Like I have these other issues, I have these other ways of working my program, and I thought, can I say this for the women who aren't in the parking lot with me? And that was part of coming together to write the book, is to say, what are women not hearing who may not be in this parking lot with these women who are very outspoken? Today, we talk about menopause everywhere because it's much more common discussion. But we weren't going to talk about that in a mixed meeting. Or if we were, it was going to be a joke. Everybody was going to laugh. Ha, 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 I'm going through this, going through that. But I would say we would joke in the meeting and cry in the parking lot. And the same was true about money. I wish now that I had put more about money in that book, because I think in the rooms we'd make jokes about money and my credit cards and I'm shopaholic, but we're crying about debt and bankruptcy in the parking lot, and nobody's putting that together and helping it. So I wanted to say these things that I thought women could hear. Now, many men have read that book and told me they identify completely with a lot of it, especially the spiritual stuff, how your program changes, how your meetings change. And one of the big things, and this became true for me, we learn life skills, obviously, in meetings, but we learn business skills in the meeting. You stand at a podium long enough in AA, you're not afraid to take the podium in Rotary or Kiwanis or PTA. You learn to raise your hand in an AA meeting. You'll raise your hand in a public forum. You'll raise your hand elsewhere in your life. That confidence is building you through AA. That's another gift.
Nice. The title, it's unusual, Out of the Woods. What is the meaning behind that?
Well, I used to hear back then that in the beginning of recovery, it'll take you 3 to 5 years to get out of the woods. And I remember as I was at 5 years, it was like, oh, baby, I am not out of the woods yet. Now I see the trees. Now I see the bunnies. Now I'm just starting to see them. And my job now is to move toward what's going to happen after this, after I've got some decent physical sobriety, some habits, some practices, some people. How do I take this forward? And that idea of coming out of the woods.
5 years is a big marker for people. Some of the scientists who studied AA, you see it. If you can make it to that 5-year level, the odds of staying sober increase significantly.
I think it's kind of like I think it takes 5 years in that sense to get into the woods, because it may, and I don't know the science on this, but it may take 5 years or some number of years to get some physical stability, all the healing that alcohol in the body damage, that has to happen. And then habits, self-care. We learn about self-care.
Right.
And we need those habits in place. And that's taking like 5 years. Once you have that, you're a pretty strong person. Some terrible thing may happen in your life. They'll throw you for a loop. But we've seen this. People who have made it to 5 years will withstand a death in the family. They will withstand a loss. And it's not easy, not fun. Oh my God.
Right.
But I think that another gift of the program is you get to look around the room and you hear about the woman whose child is very ill, and you are still sitting in that room when that child dies, and you watch her. Like, how is she doing this? How is she doing this? Or somebody's spouse dies, or they get a terrible diagnosis, and how are they doing this? How does one do these hard life things? And we learned that in the rooms.
Right. I think I'm still coming out of the woods.
Oh, you are sense.
Yeah, well, I'm a deep forest dweller.
Well, part of it is is aging, because I always say, we forgot to, the saying, how do you get to be an old timer? Don't drink and don't die. We forgot the fine print that says, if you don't die, other people will. If you don't die, you'll get some serious illness, because that's how we get out of here. If you don't die, all these things are going to happen. So there's new woods to encounter, as well as all the physical stuff that comes with aging. We're going to have pain, and the body's going to break down, and they weren't talking about that with my group of 20-something friends in early recovery, right? So there's new woods now. There's aging woods that I want to grow old in recovery.
Yes, we go to the redwoods. Nice to see those trees that are older than us.
That's right.
Very good. Okay, well, we're going to dive into some of these issues. We're going to come at them you're going to come at them from a woman's perspective, okay? And help us understand some of the unique challenges that women face. Take us to the parking lot, okay? and educate us on some of those things. Maybe in the beginning, when a woman comes in, let's start with that. Just coming into the woods.
Yeah.
How is she feeling? What is she facing? What are the unique challenges that women have coming into AA that don't get talked about?
Both men and women come into the meeting because something has happened. Usually something external has bumped into their own denial. They did something at work, a DWI, some jackpot has happened that did that. And they They either reach out for help or somebody reaches out to them. I think this slight different, and I think this is still true. The cultural issues around alcoholism and men and women. Here we are, many, many years later. There is greater shame for women. It is still
there's still, huh?
I think so. I think a drunk mother is considered. Yeah. We may not say it out loud, but it's there. Than a drunk dad. Drunk dad can be a problem. He can be abusive. He can be neglectful. He can be all those things. And we understand the dynamics of that. But a drunk mother has there's this extra punch that other people do, but she does to herself. The shame of being a drunk mother. And we'll hear this in meetings, like maybe it's taking her years to say, well, I heard this morning. I drank when I was pregnant. Yeah. No dad is saying, I drank when my wife is pregnant.
Right.
But a woman who is now being made a science, being about fetal alcohol syndrome, so there's tremendous shame around that. Then there is, I left my kids alone for 5 minutes, for 5 hours, for 5 days when I was drinking. Good mother doesn't do that. Now, dad was at work for 20 hours of the day. And he's sorry. Right. He's sorry about that, right? Because we also know those parental dynamics. But that's different than a mother abandoning her children. Because you still have this frightful and intense stereotype about what a mother is, how a mother is to her children. Watch Mother's Day. And I think women are carrying that extra burden on their shoulders when they come into the room, when they do that. I also know in the workplace, I was in corporate America for a long time, and there is different gossip about the woman who may be drinking on the weekend as opposed to the man who may be drinking on the weekend. There's that little extra stuff that comes up in evaluations, promotion opportunities. We expect a guy to get his stuff together. For the women, we think that's her. That's her character, even though it's alcohol. So we're not quite as sure if we take the alcohol away that we'll still have a good person in front of us. And that's decades of culture banding on a woman. And then the other thing that's coming into the room that's in there for everybody, but it's coming in with women, is sex. There's lots of feelings about it. There are things men and women did sexually when they were intoxicated, right?
Right.
They're not pleased with them. For women, there's an extra zing for that. There's an extra stigma. Because we know culturally, there's a different look at men who have a lot of partners, because we say it like that. He had a lot of partners. She was promiscuous.
Right.
So the judgment there is different. And women are bringing that stuff with them. So women, I really think, sooner the sponsor, the better. Sooner the safe sponsor, the better. And one of your meetings, at least one of your meetings a week, needs to be a women's meeting. So you can talk, even your women's meetings are hard, but talk a little bit more about the things that you're not going to say in the next meeting. So I wanted to bring that in. Women are coming into the room with all of this extra shame related to those that are gender specific. The other piece is medication, right? So we know people in recovery, we have to be careful about all of our medication. And aging, we have to be very careful about our medications. If we have any kind of surgery, we need to be having that conversation about how to manage pain medication. But then for women, sort of like that, it's a mixed blessing of being in recovery. If you started young, you're in recovery for a long time, you're going to go through physical changes, hormonal changes, menopause, and all the rest of the story. And that's going to be, I've seen so many women in the midst of menopause, and it's not going well. They're having lots of mood changes. They feel drunk, or it feels like a character issue that they haven't resolved. I don't know why I'm cranky all the time. I don't know why I'm picking on people and fighting with people. I hate myself. Instead of saying, I better go have somebody look at how my body's doing, they're like, oh, I'm a bad person. I'm judgmental. And it's tricky because they're both in there. They're both in there. Yeah. But we need to dissect that.
We'll go deeper into each of these issues.
Oh, good.
I would like to, because you have chapters on a number of these things. I do want to talk about 13 stepping that goes on.
Bingo.
Yeah, because that's an issue that women coming into the program need to be aware of. There's a lot of predators in 12-step world.
Right. And thank you for saying that, because there are still places with meetings that feel like, well, we can't say that, people will think badly of AA. Well, maybe they will, but this is our community. Let's take care of it. I was part of the conversation recently in another meeting. They had a group conscience meeting because there was a man in the meeting who was greeting the newcomers too aggressively, and they were all young women. And, the women were like, what do we do? Now, in other meetings that I've been in, where I knew all the players very well, I would speak to the men in the meeting, and I would say, do you see what Bob is doing over there? He's like taking the newcomers through the steps. You want to address that? Like, I'll talk to her and tell her, stick with the women. But you guys need to take him out in the parking lot and tell him how this works. And then you're watching him. Because it's not fair if they just have the women being policing this behavior.
Right.
And we lose people from AA because of it. Somebody gets scared, they're not coming back. They're not coming back to this meeting. But we hope they're not going to give up on AA because something like that happened.
You had women's meetings when you came in, hey?
There were fewer. I think there was
fewer.
Like one.
There are more now.
There are more now.
It's helpful.
I think it's very helpful because the thing I've noticed even in women's meetings, it takes a while you have to trust the meeting that you're in. You have to trust the people that I can say this shameful thing, this thing that I was embarrassed by, or that's really confidential, right? I have to trust that what I say here stays here.
Let's dive in. We'll address the time thing a little bit more before we get into chapter 1. But you have this analogy of the quilt, and perhaps you could kind of work us through that, how women are progressing in their recovery journey.
A quilt piece that a friend gave to me for my 5th anniversary, and I had known her for a long time. Actually, I had known her before recovery, and she got sober before I did. Well, I'll tell you this is not part of my intervention. So this was a woman, we worked together in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and in finance business, and we go out. I thought she was really impressive. The thing that impressed me about her is she knew how to buy a round to the bar. I thought that was like so sophisticated. I was like, wow, Miriam knows how to rock to the bar. But she was always the person I went to when I had a breakup with a boyfriend or somebody was bad. And my story was always, he this, he that, poor me. And she would go, him bad, poor you. And then one day I called her and she listened. There's a pause. And she said, I've heard this before. I was so hurt, angry. Boom. She had gotten sober and I didn't know it. And so she was beginning to examine processes and habits and behaviors. And so she was like, that's a pattern of your behavior, not the bad boyfriends. That's your behavior.
They gave me a formula when I came in. We attract to the level we are at. If you want to take your inventory, look at who you're hanging around with.
Right. That is humbling. That is really humbling.
It is.
And you can still apply that today. It's like, if everybody is kind of like bad or weird or whatever, it's like, you better take a closer look here because you're choosing them too for your own comfort.
That's right.
But Miriam made me this beautiful vertical quilt, and it's 4 squares. And at the top, it is all black and white little squares, kind of like my sleeve is here. It's like that because that's early recovery, black and white. Drink, don't drink. It's black and white. Go to meetings, this many, call your sponsor, do this thing, follow the rules. Very black and white. And then, as you know,
and you need that. You need that.
I need to know where the bumpers are. I need to know what the rules are. Right.
Right. Keep it simple.
Yeah. Tell me what to do. Right. To our sponsor, tell me what to do. I may not do it, but tell me what to do. The next square down is still that black and white, but there is a section of pink over the top. And that's the pink cloud. Because now, I know. I got this thing. It's wonderful. My life is saved. My life is changed. If only everybody else had this 12-step program that I have, you too could be as perfect as me, and life is good. And part of that is we're getting physically better. We feel better. And the relief that we know there's a solution. The relief that when I have a really bad thing happen at work, I know, call my sponsor, walk it through the steps. There's something to do with it. And that is such a relief. That we have that, some people's pink cloud lasts a long time. Some people's have a very short time. And you've learned when we hear even today, I hear newcomers and they're sort of preaching to the old timers, like, here's how you should do your program. And if only you did this, if you prayed better. And then I just think, honey, just wait, honey.
About 5 or 6 years sober, I was giving a talk at a meeting, doing a lead thing. I made the statement, half measures availed us nothing, And my sponsor was sitting in the back of the room, and he called out, "Oh, horseshit. I've got 35 years on half measures." And it was true. It was true. When we look back, we're half measures people.
Right.
We may be trying to go forward, trying to do the 100%, but to think we're there, that's the danger.
Right. And I enjoy that among the younger in years people who are in that pink cloud because now, and they're quoting the literature at you and all this kind of stuff. And I was saying, like, you haven't been married enough yet, so you don't even know how difficult it's going to be just to be in a good relationship.
Right. Yeah.
So that's where there's pink over the top. There's a couple of gray squares in that because the gray is
kind of like the gray hairs coming in. Is
right.
it?
And the gray of recovery, like half measures. Like this is not completely black and white. I still want to hang on to it. I still want to hang on to my black and white. In the next square, we have squares of black and white and pink and gray intermingled. This is pretty balanced. And I will tell you, the fourth square, which is still not my favorite visually, is all different colors. It's random reds and blues and pinks and greens, a few blacks, a few whites, a few pinks and grays, because that's life, right? Here's messy, colorful life that you get to as you do this work, right? But there's still part of me. Here I am. I'm wearing black and white today. I like order. I like organization. I like to know the rules. My sort of heart's desire would be to have my life be black and white. But the longer I'm in recovery, it's not because of the blessings of recovery, right? I got stepchildren. Believe me, that's colorful and messy. I've had jobs that are colorful and messy and bosses that are colorful and messy, and they're gifts of recovery.
Back to relationships, they're difficult. And we had a way of medicating the feelings, masking them, being who we're not.
Right.
All of these things that eventually should come off. I don't know that they do for many of us. Many of us stay stuck. You can grow, I think, in 12-step program to a level and kind of get away with that. You're not drinking, but you're not growing.
Exactly.
I
often say, and I don't know if I did this in the book or I said it elsewhere, it's like number of years tells you something. I always say we applaud for people who have high numbers. Not because they have high numbers, because that tells us they've been through some stuff and they're still sitting in this chair. So credit to you. But I also think I have met people with 40 years and I want nothing that they have.
Yeah.
They're sitting in the chair. They're physically sober. They're complaining about their wife, their boss. They're stealing staples and paper clips. They're running red lights. It's like, where's your program? Where's the rest of it?
My first sponsor used to talk about it was a phrase, I think he developed it, I'm not sure, but it's a good phrase. He said, "Bill, you're going to meet a lot of people with a very limited conversion."
Oh.
It's nice, isn't it?
Limited conversion.
A limited conversion.
Right.
They got this far.
Right.
And they've stopped.
Right.
And they're holding there. But like you say, I don't want what you have. And some of us have to go deeper. If we're going to hang on to this thing.
Right.
You got to find the people who have done the work. They've gone through the different stages, and we're going to go through some of these. The physical stage, the emotional sobriety, there's work that has to be done there, and the spiritual. And I don't know that they're boom, boom, boom either. We
make decisions, we make choices along the way. Do I want to go to the next stage? Do I want to risk that? I describe it like a game show. Okay, come on the game show. You stop drinking. Yay, we're all going to applaud. You can go home now. That's fine. That's a very good price. Or you can stay for a little emotional recovery. That's great. Now, at the end of the game show, do you want to stay for some spiritual recovery? Do you want to stay for some spiritual development? And I heard this early on, and I thought, I want the whole enchilada. Something in me said early on, I want all the stuff they got there.
Chapter 1 focuses primarily on the physical. It is titled Bring the Body. So what do women need to be especially aware of here?
Okay, so culture is going to be a factor here. And you just mentioned eating disorders. One of the things that's going to show up, every woman has some kind of relationship to her body, kind of in a different way than men do, because our cultural standard for women is like we're being screamed at constantly. Look good.
Yeah.
Now, I hope the message is look healthy as opposed to look thin, but that's, magazines, newspapers, television is telling us what a good woman looks like. So we have a little bit of pressure there. So she's
And
coming in.
kids are getting this,
Oh,
Diane. I mean, from 10, 12. I mean, it just starts early
very
and it
early.
starts unconsciously.
Seeing a little one, a toddler, pull her tummy in, it's like,
Yeah.
it makes me want to cry. She's already thinking I have a tummy. She's
Yeah.
4. Or her skirt doesn't look right. Oh my God, she doesn't even know. So women, they have that they have to deal with because in a sense, you're getting sober, your eyes are being open, you're watching your other behaviors. The temptation, one of the things to throw into this conversation is transferring addictions, which is common among men and women, right? We come in, we put down the alcohol. That's really uncomfortable if you got nothing else. So men, typically, it's going to go to work, it's going to go to exercise, it's going to go to some other hobby, some other activity. Sex, absolutely. For women, some men
Absolutely.
and many women, it's going to go to food, right? I can comfort myself, I can soothe myself, or I can lose weight, which in a way, these are things we celebrate, right? You're being successful at work for the first time in your life. Good for you. You're losing weight and you've been overweight. Good for you. But that can slip and slide, right? Into eating disorders, into exercise disorders, that kind of thing. So women have to sort a lot of this stuff out as they're coming into recovery.
Yeah, and
Related
we
to the
don't
body.
talk about that, like you said earlier, you haven't had a drink, yay, 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 yay. But how are you doing with the food? How are you doing with relationships?
What would your kids say about
We should
you?
have our meetings out in the parking lot, Let's just move them all out
That's where the
there.
conversation is, right?
That's where you get down and dirty.
Right. I think medication in the broad sense of the word, because right now you've heard this where you are too. The question about gummies. Somebody said to me up here, somebody said, well, they're legal. And it's like, alcohol's legal. Legality
Yeah.
isn't the issue. It's like, I think using the term mind altering, am I using anything that is mind altering?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't use alcohol anymore. Now, what about all these other things that are suddenly on the smorgasbord in front of us? How do we work through it? And here, boy, do you need a sponsor and do you need a group? You need people to bounce this stuff off of. Because one of the
Yeah.
things, here we are in the middle of the opioid epidemic, right? New York State is getting rich on the opioid settlement money. As the Sackler lawsuits, the money is trickling in and appropriately being spent on intervention and recovery training and all that kind of stuff. But it's a lot of money. And I think the question about opioids, and this goes back to way long ago in AA. I remember my first couple of years, and I think shame on AA or the individuals in it, that told people not to take their antidepressants, told people
Yeah.
not to take a painkiller ever, no matter what. Well, the
Right.
body can't heal if it's in tremendous pain. And so you need to really have that conversation with your doctor. What is the right amount of painkiller? Who takes it? Does my wife hold the bottle of pills? Does my friend down the street hold the bottle of pills? Because I want to be careful, because we have to sort that stuff out. And women are going to be prescribed more than men. That's statistically true. They're going to get more medication fixes. And
Right.
how do you sort all that out? AA has the greatest saying: we quit things in the order in which they are killing us, right? So if you are a heroin addict who is also drinking, let's stop the heroin. Then we'll
Yeah.
get to the alcohol. Then we'll get to the tobacco. Then we'll get to the
Right.
gummies. But our culture is putting this stuff in front of us all the time. And young women especially, whew, right?
Yeah.
And they have, then there's shopping, right? So for all women, shopping addiction, younger women, lots of shopping addiction, which equals debt, which contributes to shame. And how do we fix our shame? We cut off those feelings with something, some substance to cut off those feelings. So it does get intermingled, I think, a lot.
Let's talk about feelings and trauma. I don't know if you've done much research into trauma stuff. If you've had emotional trauma, childhood trauma, sexual trauma, and a lot of us bring this stuff into recovery. I'm dissociated in many cases from my body. I am
Yes,
not present in my body.
exactly. That piece I've seen a little bit more with men who do some physical damage, like with weightlifting and bodybuilding, which some men in recovery go in that direction.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
they're tearing down their muscles just to stay out of my feelings and in my body. In that sense, I'm gonna get strong. If you dig down under why do you need to be so strong? They're protecting
Right.
that little kid from a long time ago who had some trauma. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I know they say keep it simple and all that good stuff, but under the surface, these things are going on.
Yeah. They've been going on. They led to that because I know that like my eating, and I've said this when I tell my story, early in my life, I did with candy what I later did with alcohol.
Absolutely.
I stole for it. I hid it.
Me too.
I wouldn't share it with
stealing.
you. I wasn't going to give you my candy
No, hell no.
because it was
Jeez.
fixing my little kid feelings. It was fixing my feelings.
Yeah. My dog ate my Easter bunny one year. Talk about trauma.
Oh my God.
Wanted to kill him.
Goodbye ears.
Oh, my God.
So heartbreaking.
Oh, yes, yes. No wonder I drank. It was the bunny. It was the bunny business.
Yeah. You know, Bill and Bob would probably be like sitting up straight thinking, oh my God, all these people now they go to therapy and then they're doing trauma work and they have to read like their self-help books, the palace this big. And you want to say to people, no, we're in recovery. We'll get there. You'll get to that. You'll get to the trauma work. You'll get to the therapy work. If your marriage is breaking up right now, okay, that's a little bit of therapy there. See what's going on.
Well, Bill, for God's sake, was severely depressed for 11 years.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah. And seeing therapists.
Right.
And doing some 13th stepping.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's a reason for some of this stuff going on. They're both smoking themselves to death, huh? I couldn't sleep when I came into the program. That's 52 years ago, you know. I was talking to a guy the other day. He was like, how much coffee were you drinking when you came in? About 18 cups a day, you know? This insomnia, where's this stuff coming from,
right.
you know?
And then we're serving it to you. One of the people that I heard, I don't even know if he's still alive, Bob Earl, was an AA.
Oh, yeah.
He was a tape speaker back in the days when we passed the tapes around.
Right.
And he talked about, I mean, I would listen to him like big-eyed. Maybe he had like 15 years at that time. But I remember him saying this, I don't want to go to 12 different meetings. One for food, one for alcohol, one for drugs, one for this, one for that. He said, I want to take me to a recovery meeting. And that has always been my goal, is talk about my whole self in a meeting. And he talks about he had a very abusive childhood. And that kind of threw him into depression. It's like year 7, he went into a suicidal depression. And he had to then do that work and stay sober. But I also think it's like it's God or it's our psychology, whatever. It's like these things come up as we are ready to deal with them. I mean, I was not ready in year 1 or 2 to deal with any of my childhood trauma. I knew it was there. I could tell you the story kind of without any affect, but I wasn't ready to feel it. I needed the stability of sobriety before that could happen. And I think to a newcomer, that may look like going backwards. But it's like these things need to be addressed or they're gonna get you.
Right. Yeah. So timing is very important. When are you ready to deal with this? And I guess sponsors are important there because some are going to say, well, you don't ever need to deal with this. I never did.
Right.
You know, and they poo-poo the childhood trauma stuff and they poo-poo the eating stuff.
Listen so carefully, like when they say, look for people who have what you want. I mean, I didn't even know what that meant in the beginning, right? I thought, let me go out in the parking lot and see who's the nicest car. One part of my story is I heard, look for people who have what you want. And there was a woman in one of my early meetings, and she was tall and blonde. She had been to Harvard. She was a writer. And was like, I want that. Because all I could see was the outside. Now, God tricked me because she was like the best sponsor, one of the best sponsors I ever had. And I've had several, because she was like, okay, let's start in on the steps. You'll do them more than once in your life, but let's start. Let's get you in the club.
Yeah. Well, listen, we are about running close to the hour mark.
That flew by. That really flew by.
It did fly by. It did fly by. This is fun and it's important. The book is Out of the Woods and a Woman's Guide to Long-Term Recovery. Diane, do you have a website?
I do. It's pretty simple. It's DianeCameron.info.
Diane Cameron, Cameron.info, INFO. And I'll put a link to that.
Oh, good. Thank you.
In the show notes. We got a link to her book. Got a link there to that article on the need for community recovery, and a link to the parking lot, a link to the nearest parking lot. So you guys
go find a church parking lot on a Saturday morning.
There you go. Just sit on the curb and get down to the real nitty gritty of stuff. So, well, thank you, Diane. We're gonna be going through the book, kind of chapter by chapter, put 2 or 3 together each time. If you've enjoyed this, please come on back. Ask the women to make sure, if you've got a friend out there, have them tune into this as well. So, Diane, thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you guys for listening. As Dr. Bob said, I think it was he. They all say it. Keep coming back. God bless.